We all love rock and roll. And what makes rock and roll great? The producers.
The producers are the thing that holds everything together. They're the psychiatrists for the band. They can be backing musicians. They're telling the engineer what to do. They're extremely important. And on this, our 75th episode, Wheels and I thought we'd talk about some of our favorite producers and some of our favorite albums from those producers. So sit back, enjoy the show, and learn a few things while you're at it.
Vinyl Gang, we've got a good one for you. It's our producers show. And these are we each picked 5 of our favorite producers, and we're going to dive deep into their catalog and hooray.
And career. Yeah. It's a different thing for us to do. Normally we're talking about bands or we're talking about albums, but the producers are such an integral part of this whole process. And I think that for a lot of people, it's just something they don't even know or think about.
Right. And when you start looking at your favorite producer's work, it's going to list a bunch of your favorite bands.
Yeah.
They go hand in hand.
Yeah, and they fly under the radar. They're kind of like the unsung heroes of popular music.
Absolutely. And a lot of these producers are musicians in their own right.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, they can play instruments there's a couple of them that I'm going to talk about that have done a lot on a lot of the albums that they've produced. But
they're not just producing.
No, they're doing it all. And I've always been one of those geeks that reads the liner notes and digs into this since I was very little. So I'm pretty excited to share a producer show with you guys. But you know what else we need to share with these guys? That they need to go to our YouTube channel and subscribe, right? They need to like the videos they see there. What else do they need to do, Wheels?
Give us the old thumbs up.
The big thumbs up. And we also want you guys to comment. And there's something that I thought of today when I went to YouTube. When I go to YouTube, I don't automatically go to the shorts button. But on Fridays, we put shorts out. And I want to remind all of you guys to go to that shorts button on our YouTube channel or on your YouTube app, hit shorts. And if you're subscribed, our short for Friday should come up. So I threw this idea out to the whole crew and everybody seemed to love it. And I think that producers are kind of, for the casual fan, or maybe somebody who's more than just a casual fan, producers are something that people know about, but maybe aren't as familiar with as a dork like me. Now, what did you think? Much like when you talk about like record labels, when you were shopping as a teenager, record labels pointed you in the right direction. Producers kind of point me in the right direction of what music I listen to and buy. So
yeah, it's the same thing. And I got to say, early in my musical journey, I didn't really look at the producers as much as the labels. But as I've gotten older, I'm like, oh, it's the same producer as this album.
Yeah, it's kind of like a family tree.
Yeah, it almost. Really, that's it to a T.
Yeah, if you look at like members of bands and the family tree, sometimes it's a band like ZZ Top that for 50 years had the same members. But sometimes bands have a rotating door of members, people coming in and people going out. But producers are kind of like that link between those family trees of bands and other bands that maybe who they're working with now were inspired by. I mean, it's fascinating to me, and I hope it's fascinating to you guys. And what was the first producer that like really popped into your head when you were thinking about this?
The first one I thought of immediately was Martin Hannett, who was the producer of Joy Division. And he was part of the whole Oh,
The whole group.
the whole group, because it was they created a record label and a
nightclubs.
nightclub. Yeah, the Hacienda nightclub, Factory Records.
Yeah.
And Martin Hannett was the guy behind. He produced all of Joy Division's work.
Did he also do New Order?
He jumped into New Order early, but then there was a little tiff, and he was fired by or let go because
Asked to leave.
there was some sort of royalty lawsuit. And so in '82 he left.
Okay.
But then he came back and he was an employee of Factory Records.
Interesting. Well, what I was going to say when you mentioned that, I mean, both Joy Division and New Order, I've yet to dig in, but from what I know that you have shared with me and us, it kind of felt like an Andy Warhol factory kind of
It
thing.
really was. It really was.
Yeah. Which is really interesting at the time that they became popular.
So Hannett attracted attention in '77 when he produced a Buzzcocks EP.
Oh, cool.
And that was Spiral Scratch.
Okay.
And then, of course, all those bands, a lot of those bands that were coming up at that time were influenced by Sex Pistols. And after he produced, the Buzzcocks album, he became like this it guy.
Yeah. And that's what happens with these dudes.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone that I'm going to talk about, that happened.
But when Ian Curtis of Joy Division hung himself, it really affected Hannett a bunch because he was slated to produce U2's Boy, and he'd produced one single, 11 O'Clock, for Island, but he just was not there.
Wasn't able
And so
to
the
do
band said, we don't think this is a good idea.
Yeah.
And he had checked out for a bit. He just couldn't concentrate on work.
Cool. So, what are some examples of his producing work? Of course.
Yeah, the legendary album. I mean, because really everything else released was posthumous.
Tell our listeners what album this is.
Oh yeah, Joy Division, Unknown Pleasures.
And the iconic album cover.
Yes.
Minimalist. Very cool. I see, the weird thing is I see young kids that are younger than your kids walking around with T-shirts with this T-shirt on.
Yeah, it's like the Misfits logo. Yeah. It's become
it's become a big deal.
Yeah, it's become a big deal, and people may not even know where it came from.
Yeah.
But they're like, "Ooh, that's cool."
So, for you, what was it about Joy Division that absorbed you into it?
Well, it was just it was really the sound. It was unlike anything else. Joy Division has been listed as post-punk, goth. They're not really goth, but it had a dark, it had a very dark, deep sound that was not like the other post-punk stuff.
Well, obviously it stood out because they have kind of come into their own, since they burst onto the scene.
Yeah, Hannett liked to use these drum sounds mixed with synthesizers that were complex and really distinctive.
That's cool.
And it was, that's how he had a sound that other bands were like, ooh, I really like that sound.
And that's back when you had to create it.
Yes.
It wasn't just available somewhere on a piece of equipment. You actually had to go out and find and nourish that sound.
Yeah, he had a collection of BBD echo devices, and that's how he kind of created the sound.
Oh, that's cool. That's interesting, man. What else has he done that you
the first New Order collection of songs, which was, this is funny because Factory everything had a number.
Yeah.
and this is Factory 50,
1981.
1981.
Is this
And-
Greatest Hits?
No. It's more of an EP, I guess, because
Okay.
their songs were a little longer.
That's cool. Yeah, man. As often as we do shows and get together and do the Vinyl Ventures thing, I always say that Joy Division and New Order are something I need to look into. And you know what? I'm going to promise you, I'm going to listen to them over
You're
the
going to
weekend.
listen to
I'm
them.
going to listen to them over the weekend.
Nice.
What else you want to talk about, Martin?
I mean, there's not a lot to talk about him.
Is he still around?
No, Martin has left us.
Okay.
Martin expired in 1991.
Oh.
And Martin was a heavy alcohol and drug user.
Which, a lot of bands
Yeah.
of that era, did the same thing. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it just came with the territory, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's cool, man. I love it. I have always liked their graphic art. It's just so different. Even New Order. I mean, it's very cool. I'm sure different direction,
Yeah.
but it's always been very distinctive.
Yeah, and checking out at 42 of heart failure.
Ooh, I wonder what that was caused
Yeah.
by.
There were some substances involved.
There may or may not have been some booger sugar. I'm sorry. I had to say booger sugar. I wanted to get it into the producer.
You had to get it in.
I don't know why that makes me laugh so much, but
Yeah.
it does. Anyway, I'm not laughing at Martin having left us. I'm laughing at my stupid joke. But that's a great one to start with. I mean, these guys, for some band members, kind of become father figures too. I mean, there is no limit to the responsibilities that a producer on the recording of an album has. I mean, you do the job and you get it done. And obviously, the reason we're talking about these guys is because they were so good at doing that.
So, Jay, I want to add one more. We just saw a show,
Yeah.
the Psychedelic Furs.
Yeah.
And Martin produced a couple of songs on the Furs' first album.
Man, I gotta say, going to that show, it was so great. I had no expectations because neither of the bands. Tell them who the opening band was.
Jesus and Mary Chain.
Yeah, and both of them were so much heavier than I expected them to be. So that was enlightening in and of itself. So he did a couple of the first.
Yeah, he
tunes
did
on-
a couple of the songs on the first album. This album is a collection of producers.
Is it? That's interesting, and that's their first, right?
Yeah, that's their first.
It's
I
interesting.
mean, if you look at the producers, there are a couple.
Well, I mean, you get it done however you get it done.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. That's it. If you guys haven't listened to Psychedelic First, check them out because their live show here 40 years later is great.
Oh, yeah.
Really, really great.
Really, really good.
Yeah. Well, that's cool, man.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
Bringing it on home.
you're up.
I'm up. Well, first off, let me say that I'm trying to bring records from my producers that I don't normally talk about or that I haven't talked about 100 times. My first one is Bob Ezrin. And of course, we know Bob for having produced Kiss's masterpiece, Destroyer. And I was having a discussion with my buddy Steve yesterday. So I asked him about his favorite makeup era albums and favorite Kiss non-makeup era albums, just to kind of get an idea. And everybody lists Destroyer. And the reason that they list Destroyer is because sonically it sounded better than anything that Kiss had done before. The other reason, if people are in the know, Bob Ezrin especially worked with Peter Criss on his playing to get him geared up and improve his playing. And when you listen to Detroit Rock City, you can hear that improvement in his playing. So he was also responsible for the band just being better musicians because they were kind of looked down upon by other people. But Bob was born in 1949. He's Canadian. Now remember that.
It's important.
And he's a keyboardist. And he's best known for his work with Lou Reed, Alice Cooper, Aerosmith, Kiss, Pink Floyd, Deep Purple, Peter Gabriel, Andrea Bocelli, and Fish. Now, how is that?
That's a broad group of musical artists.
Yeah, and that's another thing that these dudes do. I mean, I think he also, did I say Michael Bublé? Maybe not Michael Bublé, but he's also worked with 21st Century acts such as the Deftones and 30 Seconds to Mars. So not only is does he have a wide swath of bands from the classic era, but he also has been involved with newer bands too, which obviously helps his career. Just some of the albums that he has worked on. Kiss's Destroyer in 1976, and this is what Peter Criss said during an interview in one of the documentaries about them. When they were doing Destroyer, Ezrin co-wrote, arranged, and performed the piano accompaniment to Beth, which is Kiss's only #1 song.
Yeah.
So obviously, there was dissension in the band, from moment one. But when the band finally gets to #1, it's like an orchestral ballad with piano and Peter Criss singing and having been a co-writer of the song. So it's kind of a crazy story. Ezrin also worked with Pink Floyd on many occasions, including the albums The Wall, which you know a little.
You can hear it.
You know a little about that one. A Momentary Lapse of Reason, and technically the last Pink Floyd album, The Division Bell. Oh. So Ezrin, known for sonic quality, known for his writing ability, his musicianship. He's also known as being quite a taskmaster. And when you think about it, once these bands get to the point where they're able to work with a guy like Bob Ezrin, they may need to be reined in a little bit because they've gotten somewhere in their career, and somebody like that, keeping them on task and doing the things that he does, that's why he has the success that he does. And the other Bob Ezrin album that I want to bring out, and I don't actually think that I've talked about this Jayhawks album. He produced the Jayhawks Smile from 2000, and this is notable in the Jayhawks oeuvre because it's really their first big step away from that Americana, alt country sound. And this has always been a favorite Jayhawks record just because it sticks out.
Yeah, it sticks out. Wow, this one's really different than the other ones.
Yeah, and I haven't read a lot about what their experience was with Ezrin. I need to dig into that. But, like I said, one of the first producers that popped into my mind, being a music and producer dork like I am, is Bob Ezrin. So, yeah, pretty accomplished fella, and he's still doing it now, still doing Alice Cooper records anytime Alice puts something out.
Yeah, and that speaks to not only the producer's ability, but, sometimes if they're a heavy taskmaster, that is hard to say.
It is.
A band may decide, we're not sure we want to work with you again.
Which is band code for, we don't want to work that hard.
Yeah.
We're rock superstars now, right? Okay, cool. Bob Ezrin, check out his list of accomplishments. You're going to be pretty impressed. What's your next producer, pal?
Well, next on the list has to be Butch Vig.
Oh, he's another one I just immediately thought of.
Yeah.
And I figured you'd choose Butch.
Yeah, Butch. First, I'll put up the one that really put him. Look, we've even taped out the baby.
No, you just taped out the baby's baby.
Yeah, the baby's baby.
Yeah.
Butch is 69 now.
Oh, okay.
69.
Yep.
And he was born in 55. He has been a success on his own with the band Garbage.
Yeah. Drummer.
Yeah.
And I think he produces their stuff too.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
He just, I mean, the sound of the 90s has a lot to do with Butch Vig.
Yeah, there are a couple dudes that when you think it's not like grunge. It's not
No.
it's not the sound of grunge. There's a couple dudes that you think of, and he is certainly one of them, like one of the first.
Yeah.
And I love the way that this record sounds. I mean, what is it? It's 34 years old,
Yeah.
and it sounds like it was recorded yesterday.
Well, and Butch kind of mastered that fuzz guitar
Ooh,
sound.
I see what you did there.
Mastered, see.
The fuzz guitar sound.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But, I mean, you can look at the bands like Smashing Pumpkins, L7, Sonic Youth.
Yeah.
It just goes on. And he's a Wisconsin native. I don't know, not Canadian, but he's Wisconsin.
It's close.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the U.S.'s version of Canada.
Yeah, and he the U.S.'s version. He's contributed several electronic music soundtrack pieces to low budget films, and he's one of those guys who he's a lot like those bands who put out hundreds of albums. He's ready to work on anything.
Yeah.
He's up for anything. And the Pumpkins were kind of his first high-profile project. He did their initial release, Gish. Yeah.
Okay.
And then Nirvana.
Yeah. And then that just opened the floodgates.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're involved with an album like this, you're going to be okay.
Yeah, he's produced Jimmy World, The Subways, a lot of alternative bands. Against Me, just all kinds of kind of alternative under the radar stuff.
It must be exciting because most of these dudes, let's face it, most of these dudes are musicians and maybe didn't get famous for being a musician for one reason or
Yeah.
another. Because I mean, it's astronomical odds for your band to get a major label record deal and become famous. So these guys, still within those confines of the music industry, have carved out places for themselves because of landmark records like this one.
Yeah,
I mean,
and for Butch, it's got to be hard because he's an in-demand producer.
Yeah.
But his band Garbage, they're doing well.
yeah, yeah. I love them too. They're just, female-fronted band.
Yeah.
And sounds different than any other female-fronted band. Kind of an industrial pop female-fronted band.
Yeah.
But still, they're always doing something new, and that's respectable.
And he hasn't rested on his laurels. He produced the Foo Fighters' greatest hits.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And then the Foo Fighters were because they had a couple of new songs on there, and they were so impressed with that, he's gone on to produce more Foo Fighter albums.
That's great, man. I love it. What else has he done that you really dig?
I love
Oh, yeah. I'll get this.
Smashing Pumpkins' Siamese Dream.
Yeah, and this is the one that just came out like in 21, right?
Yeah, this is the reprint.
Yeah, that's great. I've never been a Smashing Pumpkins guy, but I respect Billy Corgan, and obviously being the liner note dork that I am, respect the hell out of Butch Vig and the stuff that he's done, because it is identifiable. It's not just music.
Right.
You hear it and you immediately think of the time, or at least I do. And I think, oh man, he did such a great job putting this together and mixing it all and coming up with what they did.
Yeah, and I've actually been at a show in Chicago where Billy Corgan was in the audience.
Oh, really?
He was in the balcony at a small club.
What show?
Peter Hook.
Oh, cool.
At the Metro.
That's awesome.
Who Peter Hook was a founding member of Joy Division.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so Billy was in the audience in the balcony.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes total sense. That's great. Butch Vig is definitely on a level all his own. Anything other? Any other Butch bits?
No, that's all the Butch bits we have for the show.
Don't mispronounce that one. Okay, cool. Well, my next one.
We should have followed up Butch bits with Bob Ezrin.
So we could do Butch bits, Bob's Buku.
Yeah.
And then my next one is the famous Eddie Kramer, born April 1942. He's from South Africa, and he's a recording producer and engineer. He's collaborated with several artists now in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, including, but not limited to, Jimi Hendrix, The Beatles, David Bowie, Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, Eric Clapton, The Kinks, Kiss, John Mellencamp, Carlos Santana. The list goes on. And when I think of Eddie Kramer, one of the first things that comes to mind is this little piece of wax that came out with the other three Kiss solo albums in 1978 and just blew people's minds. Not only because it was Ace and he was kind of a drunken mess, but Kiss wanted to do these solo albums to kind of give themselves a break from the band dynamic. That's hard to say too, and to see what they came up with on their own. And there are two really, really good albums out of the four. One is Ace's, and the other is Paul Stanley's.
Yeah.
They stand out heads and shoulders above the other two. I mean, there are things I love on all four of the solo albums. But, Eddie Kramer was the producer on this. And if you think about it, as a producer, somebody comes to you from Casablanca Records and says, hey, we're going to do 4 separate solo albums and we want you to produce Aces. What do you think? I mean,
it's like, why did I get that one?
I mean, he probably knew ahead of time what it would be like.
Yeah.
Because he'd worked with Kiss.
Yeah.
But this is one of my favorite examples of Eddie's work, just because it's something you wouldn't expect.
Right.
Getting something out of an artist that a lot of people have kind of written off, and then it's the solo album that everybody talks about now 40 years later.
Yeah, that's the one that everybody wants.
It's pretty crazy. But Rip It Out, Speeding Back to My Baby, Snowblind, Ozone, New York Groove.
That's the song.
That is such, I mean, it's not even an Ace song. It was written and recorded by another guy.
Yeah.
But Ace made it his own. So not only did he make an album with original music that just kicks ass, but he remade somebody else's song, and it's fantastic too. I mean, it's a staple in his live show.
Oh, yeah.
Neither of us were really in a position to remember that Ace show we went to, but he did play it there.
He did play it.
And another really, really good band that Eddie's worked with is Fastway. And this is all fired up, but Fastway is Fast Eddie Clark and Pete Way got together, and Eddie Kramer was their producer. And if you listen to that first self-titled Fastway album, I mean, it's fantastic. It's like, kind of hard rock in the late 70s, early 80s, but had an edge to it and kind of a almost not an overproduced, but a more polished sound. And the songs are nice and short and catchy. I mean, he's got his hands all over a lot of people's records, but this Fastway is one of those bands that I just love listening to because most people, don't really know them.
Yeah.
In 1971, Eddie mixed Humble Pie's double album performance, Rockin' the Fillmore, featuring Steve Marriott and, of course, Peter Frampton. In the 80s, Kramer produced Buddy Guy, classical guitarist John Williams, the Kentucky Headhunters. You remember those guys?
Oh, yeah.
White Snake, Icon, Pretty Maids, Fastway, Alcatraz, featuring Steve Vai and Graham Bonnet, and Anthrax. So
he did a lot of metal.
Yeah, he did Among the Living for Anthrax in '87, which yielded a top 10 single, I Am the Law. In the 90s, he worked with John McDermott. He worked on, he also was very involved with the Hendrix family's Experience Hendrix stuff. So, and he still works with the Hendrix Family Trust on any of the new live albums or any of the unreleased stuff that Hendrix has that they put out. Eddie's got his hands all over that too. He produced Stone Free, which was the 1993 tribute to Jimi Hendrix, and that's great.
That.
Eric Clapton's version of Stone Free on that is off the charts good. But Manic Depression, I think it was King's X that did Manic Depression on there. I mean, you talked about Stone Free before.
Yeah.
When I worked in Sam Goody Music Land, that came out, and I was just blown away by how great it was.
Yeah, it was really good.
It was one of the first tribute albums that I was like, wow, because sometimes they can be a little eh.
Yeah.
In the 2000s, he got a Grammy for engineering a single called "The Game of Love" with Carlos Santana and Michelle Branch, and he's in a 2000 exhibit at San Francisco Art Exchange displayed Kramer's photos of Jimi Hendrix and other rock luminaries. So he's a photographer too. In 2010, he also remixed "Cheap Sunglasses" by ZZ Top, by Australian hard rock band Wolfmother. And I mean, he's been all over the place. And, maybe not at that top echelon of producers that people know right off the top of their head, but he's really close. And here's the back of the Fastway album. They always have the black and white checkered
That's nice.
kind of thing. Yeah.
That's a good look.
Yeah. So Eddie Kramer, folks, go seek out his work. It's really good. What's your next producer?
Well, next,
Produce your next producer.
I'm going to produce my next producer.
Was that a Mork
Yeah,
thing?
I don't know. I was producing.
Oh, okay. Well, you may want to. No, never mind. I'm not gonna gross people out.
So the next on my list, and this is a guy I was thinking of immediately, Steve Albini.
Oh.
And
R.I.P.
yeah,
by the
he
way.
just passed away in May, and he was 61. But Steve was in a band called Big Black and several other bands, but Big Black in the 80s was pretty well known. I mean,
I have an album by them called "Songs About Fucking."
Yeah. It's they were another one of those bands that just they were definitely in the underground.
Mm-hmm.
They never really got big.
No.
But they had a dense sound.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way to describe it.
They never got big, but other bands that did always referred back to Big Black,
Big Black.
and Albini.
Yeah. And Albini was kind of funny because he did not like the term producer.
Yeah. What did he prefer?
He preferred engineer.
Okay. Which is a lot of producers are.
Yeah,
engineers.
he wanted to be known as the recording engineer.
Yeah. Well, I get it.
So on a lot of albums, he's not listed as producer.
Right.
He's listed as recording engineer.
Mm-hmm. I heard that because he engineered Nevermind, right, and produced In Utero, right?
Yeah, in Utero, he definitely produced.
But he engineered Nevermind, and they offered him like a 1% piece as the engineer.
Oh, really?
For Nevermind. So,
Yeah.
And he has always had that working man's attitude. He's like, I'm here to do this album. You don't have to give me points on your record sales. He probably gave up $10 million, $15 million.
Yeah, he was big on not getting any points.
Yeah.
Even though it was offered.
And I know that his recording studio up in Chicago, there were times that it ebbed and flowed, and he needed,
Yeah,
money.
he needed money.
And had he said, yeah, just give me a 0.5% of Nevermind or
Yeah.
In Utero, and he'd be set for life.
He had very much that band ethos.
Yeah.
Like he did not want to take away from the band.
Right. Well, I totally get it.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, did he die of a heart attack?
I don't know for sure. I probably
I thought it was a
because
heart
he
attack.
was 61. Yeah.
And that was just earlier this year.
Yeah.
Right.
In May.
What a bummer.
Yeah.
But he has brought so much amazing music to so many people, and that ethos and that working attitude is why he gets the results that he does. So what are some of your favorite?
Yeah. He died of a heart attack.
Yeah. So what are some of your favorite?
Well, the one that probably put him in the biggest commercial eye was, once again, we had to do another naughty cover.
Yeah.
The Pixies, Surfer Rosa.
Yeah. We can't handle casual nudity here on YouTube. Surfer Rosa. Now, the Pixies are another one that, you know, I know Frank Black. I haven't really delved into the Pixies, but this is an album that people love for the way that it sounds.
Yeah, and he took a lot of the experiments and sound design he used in Big Black to other bands.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
This is the reissue of this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's such a cool, I love the artwork and the photos, and I wish we could actually show the whole photo. But it almost looks like a piece of literature.
It really does, yeah.
So what was it about the Pixies that
Well, the Pixies were one of those bands because they were kind of late comers to the 80s scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I picked up, I liked them quite a bit. And I never saw them back in the day, but last summer I think I had a chance to see them. 2 summers ago.
Was it me that you told that they came out and Frank Black said nothing and just they played their music and got off stage?
They play, they have no audience banner. He may say who the band members are, but that's it.
Oh, I'm sorry, Black Francis. He's Black Francis now.
I think he's always changing his name. He's an interesting character.
Kind of like Tobias Forge from Ghost.
Yeah.
No, the Pixies, you know, so many people love them, but they're still kind of an underground band. They're kind of like an unsung band. And to be completely honest, I totally forgot that Albini worked on this.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So yeah, his work is vast. I mean, the Pixies, who have a very distinct kind of heavy guitar,
Specific sound.
yeah, specific sound. They do a lot of breaks where the music just stops and then they pop back up.
That's cool.
Yeah. So then you take that and then you pivot that to Bush Razor Blade Suitcase, which was, you know.
After 16 Stone.
Yeah.
Right? Or was this before?
Well,
I think 16 Stone was their first one. Sorry, I totally threw you off there.
yes, it's after 16 Stone.
So
96.
Bush is one of those bands that's still touring today. It's Gavin Rossdale.
Gavin Rossdale.
It's Gavin Rossdale's band. But they are one of those bands that I think maybe they aren't selling the records like they did in the 90s. But man, people love Bush.
Yeah.
Like it's the 70s again.
Like it's the 70s.
No, I'm sorry. I'm inappropriate today. We've had an afternoon and the R-rated button has been pushed. Tell me a little bit about Razor Blade Suitcase.
So Razor Blade Suitcase came out in 96.
Yep.
And it had several singles. Well, several. Swallowed, Greedy Fly, Bone Driven, Cold Contagious, that came out over, between 96 and 97.
And 96 and 97 are like that last wave
Yeah.
of, I'm not going to say grunge, but like that era's big bands. You had Soundgarden, you had Stone Temple Pilots, you had Pearl Jam, you had, Nirvana was obviously gone, but still was huge. And I know, although I haven't always been a fan of Bush, I love the way that their music sounds, especially the songs off of this.
Yeah.
I mean, very lush, almost like arguing with itself, because it sounds very produced and crisp and clean, but it also sounds dirty and nasty and foreboding. You know what I mean?
That pretty much sums it up. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's all Albini.
Yes. And Albini estimated that he engineered over 1,500 records, and his estimate had increased to several thousand.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he had his hands in tons of stuff.
It was prolific. I mean, he lived music.
Yeah, and he never requested, I mean, not requesting credit is just unheard of in the music business.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of egos built upon credits and saying that you were part of this or you were part of that. Obviously, he didn't give a damn.
No, and he would work with anyone who requested his service.
That's so cool. Because there are a lot of producers out there, like we've already talked about a couple of them, that do everything, that, have or like a 350-degree lineup of people that they work with. Some producers just want to be involved with pop bands, some pop stars, pop bands. Some producers just work with rock bands. He'd do anything.
Yeah, and I like that he requested no audition, only an explanation that the act would take their work seriously.
That's so cool. I mean, that's totally him.
Yeah, absolutely. And he said, if someone rings because they want to make a record, I say yes.
Well,
and that just says, hey, I'm up for anything, whatever it is. I mean, he was known for he did PJ Harvey's "Rid of Me."
Yeah,
and you hear it. I mean, all these kind of have. I'm not going to say the sounds alike, but there's a distinct sound. It's like, wonder who produced that.
I feel like all of these dudes that we're talking about, in their own ways, and obviously we don't know them personally, but I feel like all of these dudes that we're talking about are journeyman producers who aren't just trying to put credits together, aren't just trying to make money, trying to put their mark on music they believe in or music they enjoy or music they like. I mean, I'm sure plenty of them took jobs that they didn't enjoy. But the reason that we're still talking about them is because they are really good at what they do. And probably because of that ethos that you were talking about at the beginning.
Yeah, you know who else he produced?
Who?
Plant and Page.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
No Quarter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Cheap Trick. The list goes on and on. The Stooges, Fred Schneider. Another one that has a heavy sound that is really good, Helmet.
Oh, yeah. Helmet is in and of themselves.
Yeah. In the meantime,
Steve Albini. Yeah, that's great, man. Well, that's an awesome one. I actually have not seen that record.
It came up on a list, and I hadn't seen it either. And it's one
I love the cover.
I pulled the trigger.
I love the cover.
Kind of hard to find.
I bet. Well, that's a good one, man. Okay, so my next one is a guy, and I'm going to talk about the reason that everybody talks about him. His name is Bob Rock. He is also a Canadian, and he was born in April of 1954. He's a sound engineer. He's a musician, and he's best known for producing rock bands and music artists such as Metallica, Motley Crue, Bon Jovi, Aerosmith, Tragically Hip, The Cult, 311, Our Lady Peace, Bryan Adams, The Offspring, Michael Bublé, who was also Canadian, Black Veil Brides, David Lee Roth, and Ron Sexsmith, just to name a few. And I told you that I was a dork, but I grew up in probably the best decade because I got to see Motley Crue in their heyday. I got to see Poison. I got to see all of those bands in their heyday. And everybody kind of looked down their nose at them when the Seattle thing hit. But these bands are still out there playing live, and most of them are still recording new music. But when I got Dr. Feelgood and listened to it for the first time, I don't think I had ever heard drums sound the way they do on this record. And this record is the reason that he got the job to do Metallica's Black Album. So, it was like a springboard for him, because everybody loves the way that this record sounds. And there's the guys in their straight jackets on the back. But the other album that Bob has done that probably up until like 3 or 4 years ago, I didn't realize it was him. And like I said, I'm trying to bring albums that I don't.
Surprises are always good. What's your surprise?
I'm trying to bring albums that I don't bring and talk about all that much. But Sonic Temple, man. I mean, if you listen to this and you just aren't floored by the way that this band sounds on this record, then you've got something wrong with the ears.
Yeah.
This is, to me, this is the Cult's like major statement. And you got Billy Duffy here and Ian right there. And this is the 30th anniversary of this. I think this is 5 or 6 years old.
Yeah.
But Bob Rock, I mean, he's still working. He was known as a producer for heavy metal bands for a long time. And I read all of those to you. In 1990, he was chosen to produce the Black Album. I think it was Lars Ulrich. He was like, I love the drum sound on Dr. Feelgood. I want you to produce our record. And he's been recognized by Juno Awards, which is like Canada's Grammys. He's in the Canadian Music Hall of Fame. He's received 4 times multi-platinum for Wanted Dead or Alive and 2 times multi-platinum for Living on a Prayer by Bon Jovi. He confirmed his acceptance of the award. It's an honor to join great producers like Bob Ezrin, Bruce Fairbairn, Daniel Lanois, Jack Richardson, and David Foster in the Canadian Music Hall of Fame. They're all giants of the industry, and to be recognized means I had to have worked with truly great artists. I thank them for their confidence and inspiration. I mean, he sounds like a pretty nice guy too. He's worked as a musician with the Payolas, with a band called Strange Advance, Motley Crue, Rockhead, Metallica, Gord Downie. As a producer, he's worked, all of the ones I mentioned to you. More recently, he worked with the Offspring, worked on Motley Crue's new EP that hasn't come out yet called Canceled. Worked on Offspring's Let the Bad Times Roll. I mean, this dude is everywhere.
Yeah.
And once you get, as a producer, once you get that reputation, everybody wants a piece of what you have.
Yeah, everybody wants.
I mean, Albini's the same way. I mean, once somebody hears that quality in the music, then you're going to write your own checks.
Yeah.
For sure. But I have so many Bob Rock records. I had to pare it down, but like I said, I don't think I've ever talked about Dr. Feelgood. And I think I talked about Sonic Temple a while back, but it is worth talking about because it's just
Absolutely.
so great, so good. So Bob Rock, good on you. We bow down to your producing talents. What's your next producer?
Well, you mentioned my producer, and one Canadian deserves another Canadian.
There's a lot of Canadian
Yes.
producers here.
Yeah. It's kind of weird, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it is.
Daniel Lanois.
Oh, okay.
And boy, what to say about him? Lanois is 73, and that's one thing. A lot of the producers we're talking about are starting to get up there in the years.
Well, much like the artists.
Yeah.
I mean, we grew up in the heyday of rock and roll and popular music.
Yeah.
And, you know, those musicians are getting older, and the people that made the records are getting older. The record company executives have come and gone. I mean, time keeps ticking, man.
Yeah, it keeps moving.
Daniel Lanois, huh?
So Daniel Lanois has produced Bob Dylan, Neil Young, the Tragically Hip, Peter Gabriel, Robbie Robertson, Emmylou Harris, Willie Nelson, Not Spoon, Brandon Flowers, and of course one of his big ones was pairing with Brian Eno to produce several albums for U2.
Yeah. Yeah. Eno, he's another one, man.
Oh yeah.
Just out of left field.
Yes.
It's like these guys working in popular music is almost like a contradiction, right?
Yes.
It's certainly nothing that you hear Brian Eno record is probably going to be played on the radio anytime soon.
No. You know, his work with Eno and U2, Eno invited Lanois to produce U2's Unforgettable Fire.
Really?
So that was his first experience.
Well, what did Eno do on that?
Eno was
he an engineer? Or?
I think they get co-producing titles.
Gotcha. So this is a big album for this band.
Yeah. This was the first one that really put them in the stadium tour.
Oh, really?
Yeah. This is when they really began to be a big stadium band.
Big live act.
Yeah, a big live act because of Bono's theatrics.
Well, his theatrics, his social justice stance.
Yeah, they were very political.
His very politically tinged stuff, which, you know, of all the people in today's world that do that kind of thing, I feel like he does it with some grace. And you can tell that he is really passionate about those things that he's singing and, you know, making us aware of. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. And then he worked with U2 on a bunch more albums, but I kind of look at this, All That You Leave Behind is like U2's comeback because they'd experimented with, you know, pop and all these other sounds. And this album got them back to the traditional U2 sound.
It's a back to basics kind of thing. And I loved this one too. I loved How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb. I loved that record. That was kind of a return to form too.
Yeah.
But this one I really like too. U2 is hit and miss with me, but I always love this. I love the artwork. I mean, it's so cool.
Yeah, and there are tons of great songs on that album.
Yep. Stuck in a Moment You Can't Get Out Of, Beautiful Day, Wild Honey, Peace on Earth, A Little While, Elevation.
I mean, it was Bono who recommended Lanois to Bob Dylan.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's so cool. I mean, as a producer, every one of these guys that we're talking about has probably worked with Bob Dylan because he's done 356 records.
Yeah, who knows? We're not going to be doing a top 10 Bob Dylan anything. Well, who knows? Maybe
we could do a ranked Bob Dylan thing because I love Bob Dylan. Actually, this last week, I just rewatched that 60 Minutes interview that Ed Bradley did with him like 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Because I've talked about it here before. So good. And I think that of Bob Dylan's repertoire, I could pick 5 albums and tell you which ones I like the best and then leave the other 351 on the shelf.
Yeah. It gets deep with somebody who's put out that much music.
But it is a weird world when Lanois is working with U2 and Brian Eno, and then he's in the control room for Bob Dylan too.
Yeah.
It's just kind of crazy.
And I mean, I think that speaks to the kind of guy that Lanois is, that, bands and other producers introduce him to new acts.
Yeah. I think all of these guys, if they weren't versatile, they wouldn't have these jobs.
Yeah.
Right.
And he was even the producer, and this is somebody introduced him to Peter Gabriel on So. I've got the big time single, but from So.
This record is a 1980s masterpiece, and we really haven't talked about. I don't even have So.
Yeah, I don't. I've got the maxi single because I loved a couple of songs.
And this is just a callback. Wolfgang Van Halen, since Eddie passed away, we've learned a lot of stuff about Eddie. He didn't really listen to a lot of like contemporary music when he was around. I mean, he was busy futzing with his equipment and what he does on guitar. But guess what his favorite album was?
So.
Yeah. Panama, Jump, Women and Children First.
Yeah.
And I guess he absolutely adored this album. I mean, it's such a good record.
Yeah, I think I've probably worn out the CD a couple of times.
Yeah, it's so good. And I think it holds up in today's world too. It doesn't sound like something from the 80s.
No,
and that's probably because of the producer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great, man. I love it. Let's turn this around and take a look at it. Man, I can't read that. Tom Lord Alge mixed this or remixed it, Peter and Daniel Lanois produced it. That's a good one, man. Eno and Lanois, I know just enough about either of those guys to be dangerous.
Yeah.
Not enough. And did Lanois produce Bowie as well? I know Eno did.
Eno did.
Yeah.
I don't see Bowie popping up.
Okay. I just thinking out loud there. Well, that's a great one, man. And hopefully this stokes the interest of people listening and watching to go out there and maybe start connecting some of those dots of bands that you like. If you aren't a person that pays attention to producers, start looking at that. Start looking at the people.
Start digging deep.
Look at the people that you listened to music from the 80s and the people that you listen to music from now, which it could be the same. A lot of people don't really, explore as they get older. But a lot of those dots are going to be connected by the same producers or production team or engineers. I mean, one of the ones that I wanted to avoid today, you aren't talking about George Martin, are you?
No.
I wanted to avoid like the big fish.
Yeah.
Because we talk about the Beatles and George Martin so much, but he's another one, and everybody involved, Glenn Johns and everybody involved with the Beatles. I mean, that those opportunities lead to other career opportunities. And I just think it's a fascinating thing for these guys to be able to put these albums together and have the storied careers that they do, if they choose to.
Yes.
And that's a great one.
Yeah.
I love it.
So that's Albini. You've got one. What do you have?
Well,
Canadian?
No. Okay. So I'm the first to admit I've kind of dipped my foot back into country. There's the band called Midland that I love. And the guy that produced Midland's new album that came out on September 19th called Barely Blue is a guy named Dave Cobb, who is, I'm going to compare him. He's like country music's answer to Mutt Lange. He has produced stuff for everybody. But some of the biggies, this is Wheeler Walker Jr.'s, I think it's his third album called Old Wheeler. And there's a hype sticker on here that I love. It says banned from Walmart, Target, and Best Buy. If you don't know, Wheeler is like super talented songwriter, country guy, but he writes absolutely X-rated, almost filthy country music songs. and Dave Cobb is the guy that produces it. So like the first time I heard of Wheeler, and he's a former comedian. He's playing Wheeler, and some people don't get the joke. But the first time I heard it, I'm like, man, this music is so good. And it's Dave Cobb that's producing this. But you know who else is really big right now, who Dave Cobb produces? Is a guy that you may or may
Stapleton.
not have heard of named Chris Stapleton. And this is kind of where my country music interests kind of came back in. When Chris Stapleton put out Traveler, I was blown away. And I just love the production, the songwriting, everything is just so great. And all of Chris Stapleton's stuff sounds that way. But Midland's new album, like I said, Dave Cobb produced it, and it's just on another level for them too. And actually, ironically, today being October 18th, both copies of that new Midland album are supposed to be showing up at my house today.
Nice.
Yeah. And I would have brought it,
Yeah.
but it wasn't there before I left. But let's learn a little about Mr. Cobb. He was born July 1974. He's been nominated. Oh no, I'm sorry. He's won 13 Grammy Awards as a record producer. Based in Nashville, Tennessee. Best known for being Chris Stapleton's producer, Brandi Carlile, John Prine, Sturgill Simpson, Jason Isbell.
It just goes on and on.
The Highwomen, Take That, Rival Sons. Have you ever listened to those guys?
No.
They're a rock band, like a almost southern rock kind of band. Listen to them. He produces them too. He was born in Savannah, Georgia, still lives there and has a studio there. He said his family was very religious and was active in the Pentecostal faith. He began playing drums and taking guitar lessons at church when he was 4 years old. So he started out as a session guy in Atlanta. In doing that, his manager introduced him to Shooter Jennings, Waylon's son, and he connected with him over their interest in bands like Ministry, Skinny Puppy, Nine Inch Nails. So Dave Cobb is really into a lot of the same stuff that we're all into, but I mean, he's kind of made a name for himself in country. And like I said, he's been kind of inching outward into different stuff, but Rival Sons, they are really, really good. Let's see, what else do we need to know? He worked on Jason Isbell's album Southeastern, worked with Anderson East on his album Delilah. In 2015, he formed a record label called Low Country Sound. It's an imprint of Elektra, and it has a distribution with Atlantic. And Anderson East was the first release from that. He co-produced Chris Stapleton's debut album, Traveler, at the historic RCA studio at Nashville's Music Row. And, I mean, he's just been all over the place, man. And for me, having been a huge country fan and taking banjo lessons and wearing the cowboy hat and the cowboy boots when I was that age, I love where country music's beginning to go. I was never a big fan of the really poppy country music, bro country type stuff. I'm still not like all that big of a fan of like the hip hop country that seems to be out there. But Dave Cobb has the artists he works with take you back to that classic country time, the early 80s, you know, when you had all these outlaw country guys becoming superstars, becoming, you know, actors. And it just goes to show you that music will kind of poke its head into your life, but then it becomes so much more. I mean, how many country guys became actors and authors and on TV shows and in movies? I mean, it's pretty amazing. But Dave Cobb's work is work that I really respect, and I love the sonic quality of everything that I've heard that he's done, and it's just another avenue for me to explore. So I wanted to talk about some country stuff because
That's a good one.
We don't talk about country much.
Yeah.
I think we have one more each. Don't
One
we?
more.
Who is your last producer that you want to
And
highlight?
last is probably one of my favorite, Brian Eno.
Oh,
We've mentioned him because he's had a hand in so many other of these bands we've talked about, and he's shared producer titles. And Brian Eno's real name, this is a mouthful, I'm going to screw it up too. It's like 14 names. Brian Peter George St. John Le Baptiste de la Salle Eno.
wow.
So initially, when he broke onto the scene, he was just going by Eno.
Yeah.
Why would you not?
Yeah, you've got
With all that.
14 names. Just use 3 letters.
Yeah, just use 3 letters. That'll work. But he's another old guy. Brian is 78.
Okay.
And he's one of those producers that's had a storied career as an artist. Not for everybody. He definitely he was never trying to have a hit.
No.
He just wanted to make his own music.
Yeah. And a lot of his stuff is very atmospheric and ethereal sounding.
Yeah, and he's a visual artist. He's a self-described non-musician. He's introduced unconventional concepts and approach to contemporary music. I mean, the list of people he's worked with is just a who's who of the music business.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody from Bowie to U2, you name it. It
You know,
just goes on and on.
The non-musician thing is kind of crazy because there's another one that we aren't talking about today, Rick Rubin. He's not a musician,
No.
but look at his credits and the bands and albums that he's been involved with. I mean, you don't have to be a musician
No.
to be able to point a group of men or women in the right direction.
Yeah.
So, I mean, sometimes these guys are probably babysitters. I'm sure sometimes these guys are bailing people out of jail. They're going to be a parent or a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I mean, these guys do everything.
Yeah, the producer is really the project manager for the show,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
the band,
Yeah.
for the album.
And that's about as much credit as they usually get.
Yeah, and they're usually okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, he's a great one. So I'm excited to see your examples of Eno's work.
Well, first off,
I knew that was going to be one.
the Talking Heads remain in the light. And Eno's one of those guys, he doesn't have to work with the same band. He likes to bounce around. But he really made his name in the late 70s working with lots of different bands.
Yeah. Talking Heads
Talking Heads.
when you're talking about
Devo.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
Are We Not Men? I mean, he liked these bands because they were very different than anything else you'd heard.
Which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
From the perspective that, the 70s kind of gave birth to like the stadium rock thing. FM radio came up in the 70s, and the music industry was kind of changing. And, for someone in the middle of, or toward the end of that decade, working with bands like Devo and Talking Heads, I mean, those aren't exactly bands that when you hear their music, you go, yeah, that's going to be on the radio.
Yeah, especially from a guy who's producing these bands, and then he's producing bands like U2, Coldplay, Peter Gabriel.
Yeah. Both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, both ends of the spectrum.
But I mean, Devo is a highly regarded. What would you call Devo? I mean, well, if you
Art rock.
Art rock.
That's what I would call
So
it.
a highly regarded art rock band. Talking Heads, I would call them art rock as well.
Yeah, and that's kind of Eno's ethos. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what he was doing when he was a musician.
Oh, that's very cool. I mean, I think the success of bands like that speaks to how great he was as a producer.
Yeah, and he's still doing stuff, not as much as he used to, but he's still out there doing things.
That's cool. Awesome, man. Well, I love it. I love that Tom Brady in the fedora has made another appearance on the show.
Thank you, Tom. My favorite Eno. I got to talk about this one.
Oh yeah,
I've talked about it before.
because
but
I'll turn it around.
Eno and Byrne.
David Byrne.
My Life in the Bush of Ghosts. You talk about out there. It's a bunch of radio samples set to music.
Hey, that's cool, man.
Yeah.
I mean, and they were, early adopters of it,
Oh, yeah.
along with Storm Thorgerson and
Yeah.
those guys who
Good old Storm.
and I actually wasn't it Peter Gabriel who bought the first sampler that was commercially made available? Something like that.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. So, I mean, that would have been so like groundbreaking at the time. That's very cool. I've never dug in and listened to this, but I know that you, what's your version of My Life in the Bush of Ghosts? Don't you have a saying that you say?
Yeah, My Life in the Bush of Coincidence.
That's good, man. That's great. What a good one to end on too, because like you said, just
Well, you have one more.
all over the place. Yeah. But I mean, we could do a show, every 3 weeks, on the bands that just these 10 producers have worked with. My final one, and the reason that he's my final one is because, like I said, I wanted to bring records that we hadn't really seen or talked about a lot. And when you're talking about rock and roll from the late 70s, mid 70s to current day, Robert John Mutt Lange has his name all over more records than you could probably fathom. Foreigner 4. Robert John Mutt Lange, South African guy, mainly known for his work in rock as well as his previous marriage to Canadian singer Shania Twain, with whom he co-wrote and produced various songs. Her 1997 album, Come On Over, now listen to this, which he produced, is the best-selling country music album, the best-selling studio album by a female act, the best-selling album of the 1990s, and the 9th best-selling album in the United States. He's also produced songs or otherwise worked with artists such as AC/DC, which is kind of where I know him from, Def Leppard, the Michael Stanley Band, the Boomtown Rats, Foreigner, Michael Bolton, Heart, The Cars, Bryan Adams, Huey Lewis and the News, Billy Ocean, Celine Dion, Britney Spears, The Corrs, Maroon 5, Lady Gaga, Now United, Nickelback, and Muse. And he doesn't do a lot of stuff like nowadays, but he has people that have worked for him that produce stuff too. I think Nick Raskulinecz, who produced the Foo Fighters stuff, produced the last 2 Rush albums. He's a guy that...
It's back to that family tree.
Yeah, he's a guy that like knew Mutt Lange too. So, if you're a producer and you work with a band like AC/DC on an album like Back in Black, that in and of itself is a career to some people.
Yeah.
But that list of people that he's worked with is just amazing. And he's like a hermit too. I think he lives somewhere in Europe now. He's not married to Shania Twain anymore. They split up. But what a partnership that was. I mean, he's writing songs with her, and she just became the thing on earth. And like I said, 9th best-selling American record ever. It's just crazy. Apparently, he formed a band called Sound Reason in 1969. He started a group called Hocus, recording 1 album and releasing 5 singles. In 1978, he wrote and produced Ipswich Town's FA Cup final single, Ipswich Get That Goal, obviously a soccer team. His connection with the club due to their South Africa-born player, I can't pronounce it. The song is derived from a previous recording, Give That Thang to Me by Paul Jones from 1977, with some parts rearranged and new lyrics. I never knew, when I was younger and I was poring over those liner notes, I would see his name, and it producer at a certain age doesn't mean so much, but as you get older and you learn what they do and how much responsibility that is. I mean, since I was probably in my early teens, I've known who this guy is and respected from afar the work he's done just on the rock albums that I like. But Foreigner 4, now listen to these.
When did Foreigner 4 come out?
This, I think it was 1981.
81.
Yeah. So Nightlife, Jukebox Hero, Break It Up, Waiting for a Girl Like You, Urgent, Woman in Black, Girl on the Moon, Don't Let Go. Sometimes these guys' best quality is just knowing the right song to put on the record, the right song to spend the time and effort and money to record, to put on the record. And Foreigner, AC/DC, Shania Twain. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Def Leppard, and that's the other one I wanted to mention. I mean, we've talked about Hysteria, we've talked about Def Leppard's stuff, but High and Dry, to me, it's Mutt Lange. It is Def Leppard's like hardest rocking best album, and then Pyromania came after it, and Hysteria. I don't think it's an accident when these guys become the renowned producers that they have. I mean, the list that you've talked about, I mean, just incalculable how much of an effect they've had on these artists and bands' careers.
Yeah, because it says something for the producer when they work with acts that are totally different.
Yeah.
I mean, Shania Twain, AC/DC.
Yeah.
Nothing alike.
Right. I think that car driving by is maybe playing something that Mutt Lange produced as well. No, you're right. And, that's one of the things I love about our career and the things that we do is it's always different, at least for a lot of us. And we're always in different situations having to figure things out differently. And that does something to your brain and makes you excited about what you're doing.
Yeah.
And maybe that's it. It's just the lust that these guys have for this industry and for doing this kind of thing, taking ideas from a band and putting them together, and then you come out with Hysteria that's sold, 20 million copies, 25 million copies. It must be a very satisfying career to be like Mutt. Did I mention when he was born? I don't know if I did. So he was born in November 1948. So he's getting up there too.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, one thing we don't talk about much with all this is that's his job. And he really likes, going to work each day. And I'm sure any of these producers, they have like a punch list, the way they want to start.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure they have techniques and things that they do the same all the time, but it's music.
Yeah, it's music.
At the end of the day, it's music, regardless of what kind of music it is. And we all know how much we love music. I mean, music is the reason that we're doing this. 75th podcast. By the way, we didn't talk about having done 75 of these.
Yeah, 75.
75th episode. When John and I started this, it was just like we've started buying records and we've got all this video equipment or all this sound equipment.
Let's do a podcast.
Let's do a podcast. There's only 15 billion other people doing it. But I will tell you that it has become such an instrumental part of my life and my sense of self and my identity. And I really hold it dear to be able to sit here with you and talk about these producers and talk about all the things we always do. It's important for me to say that we would not have the quality of the show that we do without the help and assistance from Keith Toombs and Jacob Hansen and occasionally Kyle Chuddick. So I just wanted to throw a thank you out to those guys. I also want to thank all of you who have watched and listened, gone to the YouTube channel, downloaded. Over 20,000 times our podcast has been downloaded.
Yeah.
Just on the audio side. And the YouTube channel is newer, but sorry, I've got gum in my mouth instead of leaving it on my computer. But what I really want to say is the involvement that we've been getting from people since the YouTube channel came about has kind of totally changed this thing and re-energized it into something that it never was in the first place. Right?
It's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. And we want you guys to go to that YouTube channel, Vinyl Ventures. We want you to subscribe. We want you to like, comment. Don't forget to go to that Shorts button on your YouTube app, because that's where you'll see us pop up Friday mornings with a little 3 things you didn't know. And then tell us what other shows you'd like to see us do. Tell us other bands that you'd like us to explore and talk about. What else do we need people to do?
Comment.
Yeah, the comments are kind of like the glue that holds all of this together.
Yeah, we like having a two-way conversation with you, our listeners or watchers, but YouTube is really, if you comment on there, we try to throw in our response to your comment.
Yeah, and we like to have fun with it. And, YouTube is basically the home of this podcast.
Yeah.
And there's so much beautiful artwork being done there by Jacob, and so much thought and effort put in by he and Keith to make this thing what it is. And the other magic piece that goes in this puzzle is you, and we want to thank you guys. That's Wheels. I'm Jay, and we'll see you all the next time around.
It's a